Hello and welcome to this brand new season of your number one legal talk show, The Courthouse. Yes, it's all about the law, all about legal jargons, all about the law class 101, as I like to call it. We get to learn the law together in plain, simple, and entertaining language. And this season on the show, we have a lot of interesting topics lined up for you. Some of them are controversial, some of them are not so controversial, but you get to find out all we have for you this season. I am Itsohan Olomu-Agbodo. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
If we have to give you anything, then we have to give you everything. Lava Plus Channel 465 is simply the best. Because we have something for every member of the family. So dads, keep the team spirit going on with our intriguing sport highlights and reviews. And moms, cooking is never boring when you have our intriguing drama series. And for all your lovely kids, just sit and enjoy. This, and oh this. I told you, we have something for everyone. Because we are indeed all about you. So keep it locked on Lava Plus Channel 465 on Star Times.
You're welcome back if you just joined us. This is the Courthouse, and this week we're talking about the right to protest. A lot of countries all over the world are experiencing different protests right now. Some of them are calling for change in government. Some of them are calling for a review of government policies. But even in Nigeria, we recently had some protests resulting in a group being proscribed and in another leader of a group being incarcerated. But this week, I'm joined by David Amakiri, who will be talking about the right to protest, whether the right exists, whether it's a total right without limitations and the like. So, David Amakiri, you're welcome to the Courthouse.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Okay, so the right to protest, how fundamental is that right?
I think we are here again talking about an issue that is becoming a new normal, you know. I think ever since the rise of the Arab Springs, we have increasingly seen the use of people power, and usually expressed through protest or civil disobedience. And like every other country in the world, there are two sides to the divide. There are those who want to express their rights, and then there are those who think that such rights should be curtailed. So if you ask me how fundamental it is, I think the right to freely hold a view is as important as being in a democracy.
Okay.
Because why I say freely hold a view, because if you are looking at protests, you are looking at two fundamental things. Do people have the right to freely speak?
Okay, so freedom of speech is
freedom
intertwined
of speech
there.
and expression.
Okay.
And then do people have the right to freely assemble? And if you look at the Nigerian Constitution, Chapter 4, Section 39 gives every Nigerian the right to freedom of speech, freedom of expression of views and opinions. And then Section 40 gives the right to freedom to assemble.
Okay.
So, is the right to protest a fundamental right? It is a fundamental right to the extent that it is related to these two rights, the right to speak and the right to assemble.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you look at it that way, I believe at that point the actions of state actors will become more guided, and then you feel a disdain for the way state actors respond to protest. But in my opinion, the right to protest in a democracy is as fundamental as the right to speak and the right to assemble.
Okay, let me leave you to restrict it only to democracy because most of the countries are experiencing protests right now, like Algeria, even Sudan. Sudan's the government was ousted, a military actually took over, but the citizens protested. They actually staged a sit-out, and the military actually responded to them. So even in that country, in terms of military rule, they also expressed, or they were allowed to express that right to protest or to demonstrate against the government. What's your take on that?
I think the situation of Sudan is quite unique because sometimes there's a difficulty for us to classify what Sudan is. But I like to think that Sudan is not a monarchy, and Sudan is not a military rule. Because if you look at it, Sudan was being governed by Omar al-Bashir. And then Omar al-Bashir came in through the democratic process, but then kept elongating his stay, okay? And then when there was international pressure, you know, there was an order by the Interpol against him, restricting travels and all that. Then there was also internal pressure. And so because of those pressures, he had to step down. He had to, step aside. Okay, so Sudan is in that sense, is a democracy, and that was the beauty of it, because at a point in time, the people felt fed up by the rule of al-Bashir. The same thing with Robert Mugabe. So despite the difficult democratic terrain in Africa, we see that people power is an important factor for governance, in governance.
Okay, now, because we're going to restrict it to law so that we'll not go too much into politics. Now, some of these protesters, in fact, using the Shiite group as my first example, they staged a protest for the release of their leader,
yes,
who was, of course, later released. But when they staged this protest, within weeks of their protest, they were proscribed as a terrorist organization. Is that how the government should legally react to such acts of demonstration against the government?
I mean, the Shiite difficult situation, because again, the Shiites, you know, they're a sect of Islam
yeah,
and all that. So, and then it seems to be that they perceive that the action of government is kind of trying to curtail their rights to freedom of religion. And so because of this, they decided to take to the streets, you know, protesting about the incarceration of their leader and all that. I think they also have the right to protest in that way. The difficulty in the Shiite situation is we have seen time and time again that when there's a protest, there's a clash with the security forces, and then it invariably leads to loss of life or property. So at that point, at what point can we say the state should continue to allow them to act?
Okay, so that now brings me to the question. The group said they were not armed, and we had security forces with live ammunition, live weapons, releasing bullets and things like that that led to the deaths of some other people. In a democracy, in a proper legal setting, when people are protesting, what should be the role of the security forces in that country?
I mean, the first and foremost, the security forces must understand that, yes, they are there to protect life and property, but the protection of the rights of protesters is also as important as protecting lives and property. Because it's a psychological thing. You are going about a protest because you are aggrieved. And then you see policemen, riot police, army officers with assault-style weapons. I mean, the natural instincts would be to react in a defensive way. And so because of those reactions, there tend to be violence. But I think that our security forces must move to a point where there is reasonable citizen kind of policing. We need to react in a way that shows that we understand that the issue of protesting to advance a cause is a new normal. Our security forces clearly don't understand that. They think protest is still one crude thing. They think protest is a riot. So that's why they go about with assault-style weapons. We are not in a battlefield. Protest can become a bit rowdy, can look riotous, but we are not yet in a battlefield. And so if you find that state actors keep going with excess force, then invariably protest will lead to violence like you see. So my thinking is security forces should react in a way that shows that they understand the circumstances in which they are acting. So if you are trying to prevent a protest, or should I say provide a security during a protest, if you are trying to provide some form of security, does it mean you will not carry weapons? You can carry weapons, but does it mean you shoot protesters openly?
Because all over the world we have protests going on, and we hear of tear gas, we hear of rubber bullets, we hear of water sprays and things like that.
And you see what is happening in Hong Kong, where they have been on protest for almost 9 weeks. And you see that it's a mass protest. But I think, to me, one of the reasons why it has not descended into a bloody protest, it is because of the way the security forces are reacting now. So they go with their shields, they go with tear gas.
They actually build a fence around the protesters.
Yes, they build a fence. So as it is now, it hasn't gotten to an extent where we say, oh no, this is something else. Because of the management. I think that is now a new phase that our security is getting into. How do you manage the grievances of a mass crowd? How do you manage it? I think that is what they need to learn. Because remember, whenever there's a protest, it's because there's grievance. And if people are aggrieved, if you try to stop them from being aggrieved by force, you only postpone the evil day. Because even if they stop at that moment, the problem has not been solved. And then there will always be need to come back. And for the Shiites, I think the government must be extremely careful, because this is the kind of coloration that the SY Boko Haram came with. This kind of mass civil disobedience, leading to the killing of some of their leaders and then leading to a terrorist organization. Okay. We don't want the Shiites to get to that extent.
Okay, because apart from the Shiites, of course, there are other groups that have staged protests that the government actually frowned upon. But we have a report for you and some of our legal nuggets. We'll be right back. A person's right to air grievances without fear of retribution or censorship is fundamental to democracy all over the world. Free expression of one's belief is encoded in several laws, both on the local and foreign scenes. The right generally protects free speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and freedom of assembly. Protesting, the time-honored practice of publicly speaking out against perceived injustices and urging action, is a form of assembly thus protected by the Constitution of Nigeria and that of several other nations. But while there's a right to peaceful protest in the US, peaceful being the underlying word, there are limits. The right to protest is a human right arising out of a number of recognized human rights. While no human rights instrument or national constitution grants the absolute right to protest, such a right to protest may be a manifestation of the right to freedom of assembly, the right to freedom of association, and the right to freedom of speech. Additionally, protests and restrictions on protest have lasted as long as governments have. Many international treaties contain clear articulations of the right to protest, and it is crucial for individuals who are interested in protesting to stay up to date and aware. Such agreements include the 1950 European Convention of Human Rights and the 1966 International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. You're welcome back. This is still the courthouse, and we've been talking about the right to protest. And our guest this week is David Amakiri, who's been talking about the various protests going on and how the government should react, how state actors like the police force and the like should react when there is a protest. But I want to ask you now, we saw the revolution now. The revolution now led by Sowore. He had not even gone on the street to protest, and the government incarcerated him and said, "You are guilty of treason." What is treason? Is it just saying, "I'm going to go stage a protest," tagging it "Revolution Now"? Does that constitute treason? What is your reaction to this state of affairs?
Okay, I think first of all, the reaction of the police, the reaction of government to how Revolution Now group was trying to gather momentum, it shows that we don't really understand where we are. To me, it shows that we don't really understand. And this is why I say that if you look at treason and the offense of treason and the offense of treasonable felony, one thing is notable, and that is that it has its roots in colonialism, one, and it has its roots in military-style government. Within Nigeria's democracy, within our democratic setting, I can't remember any case where somebody was convicted of treason. I'm struggling to remember such an instance. It means that having such offenses do not really serve a democratic purpose. Do not serve at all.
Okay, a lot of people actually said that the government didn't have to wait for the protest to actually go on and materialize into a revolution, into a full-scale revolution.
So then at what point?
They were good.
At what point will you be able to say people can protest?
No, they're saying this is not just a protest. This was supposed to be a revolution. A revolution is a takeover of government, forceful takeover of government, and that's what amounted to treason. So,
okay, treason is that you are trying to topple government.
Yes.
You are trying to. Treason is basically an offense against the state. So it's saying that you are trying to overtake the state, overtake the government. So things like trying to forcefully change a government is treason.
Yes.
Things like trying to forcefully remove government officials, the government of the day is treason. So how will you situate it? I mean, the perfect example of a treasonable felony is a coup d'etat. It's a coup. So how will you say a revolutionary protest is a coup?
Okay, so if you were to act as the defense lawyer in that case, how would you respond to the charges leveled against Sowore, for instance?
At the point it was, I don't think they have enough materials to convict him for treason.
Okay.
Because if I come and say, oh, there should be a revolution, and so, yes, revolution means there should be change. Revolution refers to paradigm shift. So there can be positive revolution.
Okay, now again, some people went ahead to carry out that protest while Sowore was detained. because he was detained to prevent him from going ahead with the protest. But
No,
another
from going
protester,
ahead with a revolution.
with a revolution. Okay, let's call it a revolution now. Let's stick with the revolution. And these people were arrested by the police. They were arraigned, and is that supposed to be so? In a democracy where we're supposed to have a right to protest, is there a limitation? Did they violate any of the provisions of the law to warrant them being arraigned for disturbance of the peace and things like that?
And you know that in such a circumstance, there's a fine line, and sometimes it's easy to look for ridiculous offenses to charge people with. For example, one ridiculous offense would be disturbing the peace. Okay. Another one will be resisting arrest. But you see, that's the difficulty of resisting such actions in a democracy. How will the police effectively, lawfully carry out its responsibility in trying to stop that protest? I don't see how. And whichever way they try to do it, you would find that they are infringing on somebody's rights. Okay, because if we go by the videos that were, readily available everywhere on the media, you see where journalists were being, forcefully dragged and
pushed into
vans. And in 21st century, 2019 Nigeria, I don't know how we are going to situate that.
Another question is this. Well, some of the police officers, those that spoke to the press, said they were not given approval to go ahead with the protest. So in a democracy, under our laws, are we still mandated to get police permission?
There's an old law that, you know, we have talked about this issue before, and there's an old law that requires people to get police permits
before proceeding on protest. Does that law still stand?
But the issue with that law is the attitude. One, judicial attitude towards that law has been one of disapproval. Yes, there have been decided cases of superior courts that have said that people have the right to protest with or without permits. Because do I need permission from somebody to exercise my constitutional rights? And then the origin of that law, again, sparks of colonialism.
Colonialism and military rule.
Yes. By the way, even what is the purpose of that law? The purpose of that law is actually, I'm going to tell you so that you give me protection while I'm protesting. So the purpose of, but you see that the police is using that as a weapon to say, no, we have not given permission for this protest, so it was wrong ab initio. No. The fact that they didn't give permission, it's not wrong ab initio, because we have seen that the courts have said you have the right to protest with or without the
permission of the police.
Yes, the permission makes some sense.
For protection of the protesters,
yes, for protection, to prevent breakdown of law and order. But we have seen that the way our law enforcement is using that, they are using it as a blockade to prevent protest. That, because we didn't give permission, it's wrong, so we can begin to arrest people. It's not supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to be.
Quite interesting. Thank you so much for giving us insights into the right to protest. But before you go, just one more question. What reform would you like to see in terms of the right to protest? If our laws, you were to amend our laws, where would you situate this right to protest?
First of all, I think the way the Constitution has provided for it is balanced. So the Constitution does not need to say, thou shalt have a right to protest, okay? But the Constitution has given you rights to freely assemble and hold an opinion. It's balanced that way, okay? And I think that the using of this issue of police permits and all that, I think it's becoming a cake. I think it has outlived this purpose. I think that the most important thing going forward is for the government and the police to understand the context in which we are in today. We have long passed a military era. We are in a democracy, and in a democracy there must be dissenting voices. And so until you have concrete, people have taken concrete steps to unseat a government, you cannot say it is treasonable. And I think that is the attitude that needs to change. Police need to learn how to manage protests. I think going forward, that's the best thing. Because this Gestapo style of stopping everything would, I mean, it might stop this one, the next one will come again. The next one will come. So the issue will now be, in situations like the Shite March, in situations like Revolution Now, how do we manage citizens? How do we manage citizen expectation? I think that is where we should be going to. Funny enough, I read something recently that some pensioners, police pensioners, were doing a peaceful protest.
so quite interesting.
Quite
the police also they also have the right to protest.
Yes, because
they are citizens as well.
A tyrannical state is the most dangerous thing for everybody. A state that is without control is as dangerous as a citizen without control.
Okay, thank you so much. Before you go into politics, we have another segment, the bar book. And now that we've finished all the jargons about treason and the rest, but you used one Latin maxim that I want to just pick, ab initio. So you go and look for another maxim. Our bar book segments, you know, we share Latin maxims and their meanings. So I'm going to stick with ab initio for this week. Ab initio is from the beginning. So tell us your.
But you stole my own. So how will I? Okay. Relating to protest, I would think that where there's a right, there's a remedy.
Okay.
That's ubi jus,
Ibi remedium. Okay,
yes.
Thank you so much. So you get to find out more Latin maxims in our bar book segment. Stay with us. You're welcome back. This is still the Call House. But before we go, I must say a very big thank you to David Amakiri for making out time to be with us this week on the show.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to see you some other time. Okay, well, if you have comments for us, we'd like you to log on to our website on www.loverplus.tv. We also have numbers that will be shown on your screen now. And our email address is info@loverplus.org. We'd like to hear from you. I am Itohan Olomu-Agbodo. And I'll say, don't just get mad. Go get a lawyer. Bye for now.